Welcome to our panel discussion, Empathy in Customer Service. I'm Leslie O'Flahaven, and I'm very happy to welcome you to this discussion with 5 fabulous CX experts. We're going to talk about empathy, whether it's learned, whether it can be taught, and in customer service interactions, how it's expressed across cultures. I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll learn who's joined us this evening here, and then we'll jump into the questions. Okay, are you ready, panelists? Everybody give a wave. There we go. Okay, so won't you introduce yourself, Aileen? Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight or today, depending on where you are tuning in from. Like Leslie said, feel free to throw where you're joining us from in the chat. I have to apologise. My internet is a little bit dodgy. We're having some pretty severe storms here in Melbourne, but I am the owner of Value Driven Brand and a customer experience advocate for businesses all over Australia. And I'm so pleased to come and join these 5 legends today. So thanks for having me.
So glad to see you, Aileen, and thank you. Tanuj, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone, and hi to all panelists as well. I'm Tanuj. I head the product team at Service Insum. We work as a CX practitioner, CX product. We help customer insights and customer experience team to deliver feedbacks and feedback management better. So here I am, everyone.
Good to see you. And Keith, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Keith Kmett, based in Des Moines, Iowa. So good evening to everybody in the U.S. here. I work at Medallia. I'm a CX advisor. Just joined Medallia. Before that, I worked in the financial services industry in a global fashion in Latin America as well as in the U.S. Happy to be here.
Good.
Thanks, Liz.
So glad you're joining us, Keith. And last but not least, Miss Erica, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Leslie. Hey, everybody. I'm Erica Mancuso. I've worked in the customer experience realm for about 20 years, and I'm at a company called nThrive. My position's the Director of Offer Management. I'm responsible for service offer development, and I work on a lot of customer experience transformation initiatives as well. I'm currently leading an experience engineering project at our company with a really heavy emphasis on developing colleague empathy and advocacy. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk about it.
So glad you're here, Erica. So our first question, we're going to kick it off today with question number 1. Can empathy be taught? Are we born with it or is it learned? Now, of course, our panel is about empathy in customer service. So we'll keep our answers connected. Can empathy be taught? And can people who need this skill to deliver excellent customer service, can they be taught this skill? So let's kick it off. We'll have Aileen and Erica answer this question. Aileen first, followed by Erica. Go right ahead, Aileen. What do you think? Oh,
Thank you. My experience.
there you go.
Really? It can be taught. However, I am a firm believer that by the time you have got to the position of looking for employment, that it needs to be already something that has been embedded in the way that you do human experience. And, I know that in my experience employing team members, that generally a lot of them are quite young, and you still have the opportunity to help them understand is and they're being empathetic. But when you explain to them, hey, do you feel like this because of X, Y, Z? And they say, yes, you can say, okay, well, that's empathy. And they start to consciously understand, oh, I'm being empathetic. And they then, like anything, like a muscle, they develop that empathetic skill set. So yeah, I believe you can teach it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way you started off your answer. You said it can be taught, but by the time a person is looking for a job, we're getting later into the period, it can be taught. What do you think, Erica?
Yeah, I completely agree with Aileen. And I look at it like this. We're all using the muscle analogy, right? We're all born with some capability to develop muscles when we're born, right? It's just easier for some to build muscles because maybe they're more genetically inclined, or maybe they've been in the right environment where, they have access to healthy food and, weights at the gym, right? So it's kind of, empathy is something that can be taught and nurtured in time. If you go to the gym and you want to build muscle, you start lifting weights, you do the nutrition thing, right? It doesn't just happen. I think empathy is a lot like that. We're all born with the capacity and the capability to build empathy and develop that skill set. But it takes some work, right? It takes being in the right development. It takes some coaching along the way to help build that skill. So and also I want to point out, I don't think it's a box that you can check. It's not that you either have empathy or you don't. I think it's a scale, and there's a lot of different places where you might fall on that scale in terms of empathy. And I think it's something that we're always, everybody, no matter how good you are at it right now, I think it's always something we can continue to develop and get better at.
All right, gents, I'm trying to drive some controversy here. Does anyone want to say no? Empathy cannot be taught. You may be able to deepen it or stretch it, but if you don't have it, you cannot develop it in the workplace. Does anybody want to go in that direction? Tanuj or Keith?
No.
I think it definitely can be taught. I will just add, I think there is a lot of connection to curiosity. So as we age, so if you think about developmental children, their curiosity is endless, right? They're curious about everything, and I think empathy is tied to that. And then as we age, we start to care and choose what we care about more and more. So we sometimes just lose that curiosity to care about other people. And I think it's around curiosity. It's about trying to really hone that in and say curiosity could be the thing that you really need to explore in order to tap into the empathy.
How interesting. Is a person curious? And if so, is a frontline customer service agent curious? And if so, you're suggesting they're likely to be empathetic, or their capacity for empathy. That's very interesting. Go ahead, Tanuj.
Yeah, so I would add one more thing. I think I loved what Keith said about the curiosity, and what Erica also mentioned about the building a muscle. It's like a muscle. So the muscle, for me, the empathy, I would say, is when you want to learn it, it starts with self-awareness. That, okay, I actually want to learn. So whenever you want to do something like go to a gym, you want to say, okay, I want to lose weight, or I want to get some muscles, right? So the first thing is starts with self-awareness. And self-awareness means identifying your emotions, because empathy is about understanding emotions of other people, right? But if you don't understand your own emotion, then how you are going to understand some other person's emotion? So if you're really starting out with that, the first thing is identify your own emotions. So I do this by setting up a calendar for myself, 15 minutes every Friday, where I recall all the meetings and the calls I have been and see what could I have done better. What is the kind of emotion that I got at this time? Because sometimes you get sad or angry, and right, but you have to identify that emotion. So this is something that I would like to add, that first, before you start working on anyone else for empathy or teaching anyone in customer service, you first start with yourself and understand your emotions.
It's really moving for me to hear all of you interact, because what you described, Tanuj, is the discipline of reflecting on your own emotions weekly is exactly what Erica was mentioning in her illustration of muscle building in the gym. It's a kind of a gym of the heart. You made yourself a gym of the heart. That's really amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to weigh in a little bit. I believe empathy in customer service work can absolutely be taught, because I believe that frontline customer service agents owe customers a form of work empathy, and it's not identical to real and deep heart empathy, which they owe to the people they love. I think they need to be able to express empathy even if in their heart of hearts, they don't feel it as deeply. I know that sounds like yay, inauthenticity, yay, but I don't think I don't think we deserve the soul and heart of frontline customer service agents. This is a job, not a calling. So as long as they understand that empathy is a tool in customer satisfaction, in customer success, in first contact or any contact resolution, to me, I think that's enough. It's a job skill in addition to an emotional climate, but it is a job skill.
Yeah, Leslie, can I add to that a little bit?
Sure.
I look at it, it's a power skill. And I think, when we start talking about being on the front lines of customer service, right? It's the best tool you have to absorb the tension that you might encounter in your role. So, maybe if we approach it like that, right? You don't have to be, this person whose heart and soul is into this customer service job. But if you understand that being empathetic, showing customer empathy is a power skill, and it will help you, really diffuse some potentially difficult situations.
Yeah, I love that power skill. That's a description we can use. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on. I would love it if our panelists answer this question with kind of one time when or what we do. So question number 2, can we hire for empathy? And if you think so, then I'd love to know, and I'm sure our listeners would love to know how you do that. Can we hire for empathy? So this time we'll go first to Tanuj. You want to start us off?
Sure. So there's some kind of contradiction, I would say, in terms of just customer service agents. So I was in technical roles most of the time with customer support for 7 years. I was doing network security stuff, and there, when I would like to hire people, my first choice was not empathy. That I'm hiring for empathy. I was hiring for a problem-solving mindset. Because why I said so, when we were working there, people would do Google search and they'll try to do some kind of self-service, use some kind of self-service to solve a problem. And they would come to us only when they're super frustrated and they're looking for quick solutions, right? So I was looking for people who were quick on their feet. At that time, I was not thinking if I need to, I need them to be empathetic. I was thinking that whether they can think on their feet and quickly solve problems. So these are the kind of people. So it depends on the technical role as well, that you're hiring for empathy or you are hiring for a kind of like a controller mindset who takes control of the situations and fix things. And they are empathetic as well. So there are a couple of things that I see if I'm hiring for that kind of a role and still seeing if this person is empathetic. The first thing is, are they coachable? If we tell them something, are they actually taking it in? Are they even listening to us, or they just keep on blabbering in the interviews? Are they listening to what I'm saying and then giving an answer, right? So that is one thing that I definitely look for, coachability and their listening skills and giving a different answer if they're listening to me. The second thing is I'll ask them why they're leaving the current job. So if they tell me that they're leaving the current job because of the bad manager, so that's the first red signal for me, that they're just and then I let them speak, that what they are talking about, why they're leaving for the manager, and they'll go blah blah blah, this was bad. Then I would just ask them that, okay, do you think that there was a way that why this person was behaving this way? And at that time, if they even understood that why this person was behaving this way, if there were any kind of emotions, then only I can think of that this person is still the right fit. But I would actually most of the times ignore that person who just says bad about something else and not taking ownership. So these are the two things specific for me if I talk about hiring for empathy.
What an interesting interview question. You're allowing a person to badmouth a former boss, which is not a particularly attractive trait, and then you're turning it to see, can this person express empathy for this boss, a person they've worked with and know well? How interesting. Thank you. Aileen, do you want to answer next? Can we hire for empathy?
I actually think we can. In some of my previous roles, we used to be very much around hiring for, and I think a few people have mentioned it, for the will over the skill. And we give them customer scenarios. And what we was predominantly looking for was their capacity and their will to put themselves in the shoes of the customer, and for them to understand whether it be the customer's excitement project or their frustrations with a problem, or, you know, could they comprehend how that customer was feeling to motivate them enough to find a solution.
The will over the skill. That's, we don't need to make it a tattoo, but we could make it a tattoo. The will over the skill. Yes. Yes.
Australia, right? Absolutely. What we were hiring for. We were hiring for them to understand where the customer was coming from. They didn't need to know how.
Oh, poor Aileen. I'm so sorry. Yeah. You know what, Aileen? We should pause you for a moment and see if you can switch to a stronger connection. We're having trouble hearing you consistently. So we're gonna let you plug and unplug things for a while and see if we can get you to come in more strongly. Keith, you want to take this? Do you hire for empathy? Do you have a procedure for hiring for empathy, Keith?
Yeah, so we did chat about this a little bit in Twitter. In some of my previous roles, we did hire for empathy. Particularly, I agree a lot with what Tanuj said. Is it's important to really understand like how empathetic somebody needs to be in the role that they're going to be in, right? If they're frontline or dealing with your frontline customers, they've got to have great listening skills. They've got to have all these other types of skills. And I do agree with Aileen's comment of but the will over the skills sometimes can actually be more powerful, because some of those skills you can kind of coach, to Tanuj's point. So some of the things that we did, sometimes it was giving them scenarios and having us kind of walk through things, but sometimes we would plant little things. We would leave trash on the floor, or an odd number of water bottles in the room. So like if two of us were interviewing and there's three of us in the room, there's only 2 water bottles, but we're all thirsty. Do they push? We've set the water in front of them. Do they push it over to the other person? I know it sounds a little tricky, and it can be feel like a trap. This was not the only, that wasn't like this core metric of the hiring process. It just kind of helped us gauge, how observant are they? How much are they really looking and observing their surroundings outside of themselves? And so some of those skills of observation are things that are really, really sometimes more natural to others. And so it wasn't a pass or fail. It's always a gray. But you noticed the really empathetic people really went out of their way to make those gestures, versus the people who were a little more just not paying attention to things.
Keith, when you told us that about that earlier in our Twitter conversation, that made me real sweaty. That made me feel nervous on behalf of the people who were being interviewed when they didn't realize they were being interviewed. And I love the way you positioned it today. It's not the sole determinant of whether they're off the job. But I do want to ask, months or years hence, did you find that the person who said, no, please, you go ahead and have the water, did you find that they were empathetic in their work and they remained so? Can you connect that little test by water bottle with performance down the road?
Yeah, we noticed the people. So I'll give you kind of a concrete example. We hired one person who had literally written a book on a subject matter. And we thought they are going to be the best developer, like the best person. And we actually thought, this could be leader material, somebody who's really going to rally the team and like energize it. And then we had hired somebody a little more junior in both tests. The person who we hired both people, right? But the person who wrote the book drank the water in front of us like no other, and the other person, no, they offered the water back. Within 6 months, the person who wrote the book was clearly not going to be a team lead and was a lone wolf, wasn't that team player, just didn't really perceive the needs of the rest of the team. The other person, maybe it was because they're junior, there's lots of factors here, but the other person ended up kind of being the biggest cheerleader, and people really gravitated. There was always favorable comments. So it was kind of this is where, to Aileen's point earlier, we hired the skill over the will, and then we also got to see how that kind of backfired a little bit.
Well, I'm less sweaty, a little bit more comfortable, not 100%. We have a question from Gregory. Gregory's asking, do you feel like their behavior would be impacted by being in a high stress environment though? So, how reliable is that kind of measure of behavior? The politeness, wadding up the Kleenex and actually putting it in the trash instead of leaving it on the table. What do you say for Gregory?
It's a great question. I mean, sometimes you just never know how. I mean, we also threw scenarios out and we asked how, like, their reactions and things. So there's, again, lots of factors when you're considering hiring that you have to take into consideration. So it's hard to say that because this person drank the water, they weren't a good fit for the team. Like that I'm not, it's a little subjective, a lot subjective, I should say. But in that high stress environment, the funny part is in front of the client, the person who wrote the book showed that confidence, showed that professionalism like no other. But in their day to day, they weren't able to do that for the rest of the team. From things I've read, it's kind of like bullies can be taught manners, so they're nice to adults, but they're still bullies on the playground, right? So it kind of in that context. Hopefully, Gregory, that helps kind of answer that.
Indeed. Well, we are so happy to see your smiling face, Aileen. Thank you for troubleshooting until you came back. I'm going to give Erica a moment if she wants to weigh in. And then everyone who's joining us, I'd love it if you would answer the same question. In your opinion, can we hire for empathy? So Erica, can we hire for empathy? Do you have experience where you say yes?
Yes, I definitely think we can hire for empathy. A lot of the techniques and tactics of screening for that have already been thrown out there. I would completely agree with. I love kind of the STAR interviewing framework where you ask them to maybe describe a time when they had to deliver difficult news to a client. How did they go about that? Tell us the situation, what steps you took, and what was that result, right? The only other thing I would add that might be a little different is just, and I'm sure we're all doing this, but how does that candidate interact with everybody else in your office that they come into contact with? I think that might give you a little bit of a glimpse into, what's their personality like? Do they have a little bit of empathy? If they come in and are just rude to the person at the front desk, I mean, I kind of question their ability to be empathetic. But if they're, friendly and can carry on a conversation and maybe ask some questions of that person too, like, hey, how's your day going? That might give us a little bit of a preview as well.
All right, great to know. And anyone else? Move on to question 3. And I'm definitely going to hand to our soldier, Aileen, who has wrestled her internet into shape. So, and then we'll hear from, here's hoping, right? Fingers crossed. We're going to hear from Aileen and then Keith this time. How different are expressions of empathy in different cultures? And if you want to share an example or two, we'd love to hear. Aileen?
I had to think about this because inherently it leads you into the potential for someone getting a little bit offended or hurt when you start talking about the level of empathy shown between cultures and countries and whatnot. But I do find that different countries have different levels of empathy. And, so my partner, for example, is Dutch, and grew up in Holland, and the things that I would potentially think would deserve an empathetic response, he's very stoic about. And sometimes I thought, is it because he's a man? And, maybe I'm a bit of a sucker for other people's situations. But I thought about it and I thought, no, that is actually, I've now met his family and other people from his country, and it's just how they are. They have empathy, but the scale, as Erica talked about, it's a scale, right? So, where here maybe in Australia or the US, we might find something over here worthy of our empathy. In Holland, they're all the way over here. So it is such an interesting situation to face, because especially if you work in an organization which has diverse cultures, someone, as you said, Keith, and I'm sorry I only caught the end of it, but it sounds like the person that you employed wasn't overtly empathetic. And part of me now wonders, in my experience, is that a cultural-based situation? Did they grow up thinking, well, this is what defines the need for empathy, versus us over here who was taught, hey, this is something you should feel empathy over? So I do find there is differences in the way we're raised and environment and whatnot, but certainly cultures play a massive part in what we put empathy into.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks so much. I agree with you. I know very little about Dutch cultural behaviors, but I do know a little. And one of my favorite experiences was being in a restaurant, and the waitress looked at me and she said, "You will pay." It's just very dry. And I said, yes, of course, I will pay.
And for all you know, Leslie, she's the most empathetic person in the restaurant.
Yeah. And can I just say, Nadine is one of my amazing friends and clients. Nadine is German. Nadine and the German and the Dutch can be very similar in their levels of empathy, or the way that, and actually it's, who just said that? Gregory, do you think it's the way that they display it and express it? Yes, actually I do also, because I find Nadine, not to, you're here so I can talk about you, but Nadine is highly empathetic, but the way she expresses it is actually quite different to maybe how others would express it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a really good call out, Greg.
I agree. Thank you for that, Greg. We can't measure the amount of empathy in the heart. We can describe the way it's expressed culturally. Keith, why don't you go ahead, and then we have a great question coming in here. You go ahead first. Say what you would like to say about how do we express empathy differently across cultures?
Yeah, so I've had as I mentioned in my introduction, I've had the fortunate career where I've been able to work in multiple different cultures, and my CX career actually started in Santiago, Chile, and then I worked in Mexico and Brazil. So I worked regionally in CX and got to see empathy from an American's eyes, how empathy looked like in Chile versus how empathy looked like in Brazil and Mexico. And while both, all three countries have Latin-based cultures and things like that, the similarities were just like night and day sometimes. And sometimes they aligned with culturally how I was raised in my empathy, right? And so the first thing I had to do was really check my own bias and say, like I had lived in Ecuador when I was younger, so it was like, not everybody's going to be like the people I've met, and really do what Tanuj had suggested earlier, is really make sure that I was having that self-awareness and recognize my bias. What am I already, projecting or stereotyping in my mind, and start to really open up my curiosity. So just staying more observant, being really curious, asking a lot of the whys, I learned how important it was to not just put on somebody's shoes, but actually try to walk in them, try to really understand what it feels like to walk in the shoes, not just put them on, and stay curious. So in the cultural learnings, I learned just little subtle things, even in the Spanish language, for example, like between Mexico and Chile. Chileans have a different accent and use words in a different way than like Mexico. So one time I called a colleague and I literally, he had done a favor for me. I was trying to show my empathy. I was trying to just tell him how appreciative I was, how really deeply it was great that he had did this huge favor for me. And I said the phrase, te pasaste. And then I just hung up, kind of like, but in a good way. Well, in Chile, te pasaste means like you went above and beyond. And in Mexico, te pasaste is always a bad thing. It means you went over the line, like you crossed a line. And so it was like those little subtle language differences. And so he waited a day, calls me back. This is how much empathy he had. He waited a day, calls me back. And Fernando, I'm not sure if he's listening, but I love him to death. He calls me back and he's like, what did I do wrong? And I was like, you did nothing wrong. You went above and beyond. And we were able to, two empathetic people, we were able to talk through and resolve a conflict that I didn't even know I had started. And so, it was one of those things where, like, can you imagine that was over the phone call? Could you imagine the next time I went to Mexico, how unwelcome I would have felt by him. So it's you learn a lot if you're able to ever experience and live in another culture. Obviously, that's going to be way different than trying to understand it. But that curiosity, I've had the chance to visit India. Like I had to throw away all my Latin American experiences and just really focus on what is India, what's the culture here, and what do people care about, and just really kind of ask all those questions along the way. I visited tons of temples. I ate all the food, from chaat to everything. My team tried to trick me into eating tamarind and making a puckered face, and they were upset when I had already had tamarind candy before. So they were like, "What? Oh!" And so I was disappointing them, and I wasn't even trying, and it was just amazing. So, long story short, is the culture, the diversity. This is where I lean into that curiosity that I mentioned. It's you've got to stay curious about these cultures and not assume that your culture is right or wrong or anything. You just got to recognize your bias.
Well, you're a very lucky man, Keith. Your friend forgave you, and that's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
We have the question we're focusing on, and one from Philip. Erica, would you like to touch on how different are expressions of empathy in different cultures? I know you have experience with this.
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking about with this is so often in our ability to, or in our desire to really try to, keep everything on the straight and narrow, make sure that we're giving very good service. We develop scripts and lots of protocols and things like that. I think scripts are the killer of empathy, right? So, we're not really empowering our agents in every situation to be able to deliver empathy, right? So maybe we're stifling it a little bit by trying to be too prescriptive in the way that they, communicate with customers.
This is a very crisp and really important point. And Tanuj, I'd love for you to continue. You have a great deal of experience in this way too, and we'll comment on Philip's and Arch's comments as soon as you're finished.
Sure.
Go right ahead.
Sure. So first of all, I would like to start. I would say I was not an empathetic person when I moved to Indonesia. That's what I would say. Even though I did not realize it. So there, the culture is too polite. And in India, the culture is straightforward. You always say things on the face. If you want to get things done from your co-workers, you'll just go there on their seat and just stand there. Are you finished?
Very candid.
Yeah. So in India, it's like that, right? And everyone is okay with it. They know, okay, that the person will come, the boss will come, and the leader will come. But in Indonesia, I did not realize that it's not like that. And the first 2-3 months, I was trying to stay the same way like I was in India. And it was not going well for me at all. People started like listening to music and rather than listening to me. It was that bad. And but that situation, when people were not like speaking or talking to me, I realized that something is going wrong. I actually realized that was one of the most important things. And since then I've kept one thing in mind: it's easier to change yourself than expecting the whole country to change or the whole culture to change. Right? It's about self. That's where the self-awareness and the curiosity part comes in. And then what I started doing, going out on lunch dates with them, my colleagues, going on a Friday night party with them, and then observe, like Keith mentions, that observing is one very important thing for empathy, that how they are talking to each other. Like when they were too polite when they would ask someone, for every second thing they'll say, do you have a minute? Can you please help me? It would be like that instead of just going onto the chair, are you done? So that kind of things, like observing people, then I learned a lot. And then I learned reading about this subject as well, this empathy part, that so for every culture that you go in, the first thing is, you, like Keith mentioned, that you have to unlearn everything that you've learned from your time where you have spent. Go there, be friends with people, get to know them personally, and start observing their behavior inside the office, that how they behave, how they talk, and that will actually help you a lot.
Wonderfully said, and your investment in time is impressive. Keith, go right ahead, and then we're going to go right to the comments our viewers are asking.
I think what Tanuj said was spot on. I think it's also smart to realize that when you change roles or you enter a company, like, there's a culture there that you have to unlearn your previous culture and relearn a new one. So even if you're bringing all your empathy skills and all your talent, be ready to unlearn, apply the skills when appropriate, but be ready and willing to unlearn what you experience at a different company culture, and that will help your career tenfold.
It comes around to what you were saying in the beginning, all of you, about the fact that there may be a disposition in a person to being empathetic, but it is a skill, and we can teach it, we can nurture it. Who would like to answer Barbara's question? Aileen, would you like to have a go? How do you help agents communicate or verbalize in a standard of empathy?
I think, and it highly depends, great question, by the way, because I think it depends so much on the organization. And if agents are predominantly serving one organization, then maybe that's a bit easier to do. But I know in a lot of contact centers, they could be serving multiple organizations and trying to keep up with different types of audiences all day long. So trying to create a standard is going to be an interesting target, I guess. But I think that's also where you need to really make sure that you have recruited for empathy. And if they have a base level of empathy, a base level of, what I call human experience, then generally speaking, you should be okay. But, and I know, like, I agree with you, Erica, I hate scripts, but I can see where they play a role, but I'm a very big advocate for not sticking to them. So I appreciate them, and I do encourage my clients to create them, but then also use them again as a baseline. So in helping agents communicate or verbalize that standard of empathy, I would think that script needs to have a level of genuine empathy in it that they can use as a baseline, and then put their own version of empathy on top of that again. And again, if it's genuine, if they do come from a place where they understand where that other human being is coming from, then that shouldn't be too much to ask for.
I think we better candidly own, management needs to own its responsibility in destroying the capacity for empathy. I think that we do lots of things that, in Barbara's question, how are you in fact harming agents' ability to communicate empathy? For example, if you make the handle time for a phone call the most important thing you're measuring, you're not going to get empathetic behavior. If you make the fear of legal risk the most important thing you protect when you write to customers, then you are not going to be able to express empathy. If you put certain words on a forbidden words list, like we're not allowed to say, I apologize. Obviously, I know that apologizing and empathizing are different, but if you put words on this forbidden words list that we don't say that here, then you are going to stamp out empathy. If you don't give agents ample training in talking about policies, you will stamp out their empathy, because it's where the customer bangs up against the policy that empathy is most challenging to express, but most needed. So, let's be honest that we sometimes, wring it right out of them. They had the empathy, but we were not good enough employers, and we really damaged it along the way. Whew, I got worked up. Anybody else? Yeah.
I would like to answer one thing here. This script part, I think it was there when I was working with different support companies as well. The script was always there, but I think in some time we stopped following it. So that was a good part. So one thing I learned there, that one of my leaders told me that whenever you are talking to a person, so there used to be times every day when you'll be handling 5-6 customers that there will be a bad person there, bad mouthing you, right? They're sad or whatever it is, and we were not able to understand this in a way. So they used to tell to me that, okay, when I used to come to them that this is something that's happening, they would first listen to me and then say, how would you rate the emotion of this person from sad to happy? And I would say at that time, I think he was pretty sad. So then he would say to me, how would you handle a person who's sad? And then it started changing my mind. So I started observing that what is the emotion that the person is throwing to me when they are on the call? What are the things that they went through? And I think that little trick helped me a lot. So that's what I wanted to put in.
That's a great comment. Let's take Philip's question, and then we're going to go to our fourth question, because we're running kind of long, and I want to make sure we wrap it up. Philip asked, do you find it's different with people of different generations? Do older people in the workplace, aka baby boomers, express empathy or need a different type of empathy than younger people in the workplace, aka millennials? Erica, do you want to take that? Is that something you have strong feelings on?
When I said, that's a really interesting question, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. But, if you go back to the analogy of, working empathy like you would work out at the gym, right? You're practicing it over time. Definitely the older employees have more practice, right? They have more life experience that could cause them to be perhaps a little bit more empathetic. And I would certainly expect that as the millennials grow a little bit older and get a little bit more life experience under them. And I'm not saying millennials aren't empathetic at all, because I've worked with some fantastic millennials who have really developed that skill. But, I think maybe as life goes on, you get a little bit more experience, a little bit more perspective. That might be the way that plays out. I don't know, but I'd be interested to hear what our other panelists think there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there has been
please
studies.
Go right ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. There has been studies that show as we age, we grow less empathetic, and and it comes back to those you just don't care as much anymore. The things that some people care about, you stop caring about. You might even have a hobby that you loved and cared about, and then you've moved on, and it's like you can understand it. I also noticed in the comments, I think Jamie Moncada had mentioned, you can't really personally, you have to personally experience it in order to really understand deeply and be genuine about it. And so since you're never going to walk in somebody else's life from end to end, you'll never fully be that 100% empathetic. But going back to Philip's question, it's that the studies have shown that, as you grow older, you start to lose empathy. Now, doesn't mean you can't go to the gym and and work that empathy muscle back up and build it up, as Erica and Aileen have commented. And I strongly believe you can, as I am about to age another trip around the sun this weekend. So it is possible, but to Philip's question, do you find it different with people of different generations? Like, my own personal experience is I've seen it both ways. As Erica mentioned, I've seen some of the older generation be extremely empathetic, but also then totally opposite. And I've seen it both in all types of generations.
I think it would be interesting to contemplate a person in their 50s or 60s who's working as a frontline customer service agent,
yes,
who may have been doing that work for a long time. I think one thing we would notice is that we would be out at the outer edges of extraordinary or remarkable empathy based on experience, or absolutely damaged and destroyed lack of empathy based on burnout. I don't think we'll find too many people in the middle. I believe that the ability to express empathy is sustained by an employer's trust. And if a person who's been in the workforce for a while, in that job for a while, has earned the employer's trust, perhaps they're more able to express it. I don't know.
Agree.
It's a wonderful question. I wish we had posed it for ourselves. All right, so here we go. Question number 4. We're going to wrap up, and then we'll take any questions the people who are joining us would like to ask, and we're really interested in your comments. How do we teach empathy to customer service agents whose culture differs from the customers they serve? And I'm sitting here with my hands gripping the table thinking, oh, we do not put them down in front of reruns of Friends or something. Say, you want to know how to be an American? Watch reruns of Friends. That just gives me the shivers. So Erica, will you start us off, and then Tanuj, will you be next?
Sure.
Go ahead, Erica.
Sorry, I'm on mute, trying to figure out how to get off mute. I think that there's a couple different ways of doing it, right? I think a lot of it goes back to what was covered in the earlier question, is just understanding some of those cultural differences first, right? And I think the language barrier, there could be some language barriers too that might need to be addressed in terms of, which words to use, like Keith said, right? We want to make sure we're using the right words when we're communicating with our colleagues and our customers. So I think that's an aspect of it. And, role playing, I know it's kind of cheesy. No one loves it, but, just, kind of being in the situation and figuring out, here's the situation. Can we communicate in a way that does express empathy? And Leslie, I know you had a great article out a while ago. It was something about like advocacy statements or something like that. What to say to a customer. I forget what the title was, but it was like what to say to a customer. Those are great tools that you could, share with your colleagues. Here's how you can kind of align with them and show them some empathy, right off the bat, right? Like more than just a very kind of terse sounding, your issue is very important to us, right? We want them to say something to the client that makes the client feel like it's genuine. They actually are, are looking at the issue. They understand the issue. They want to help the client in less of a kind of robotic kind of way. Not robotic, that's a bad word, but less of a scripted kind of way.
Thanks, Erica. Tanuj, what do you think? How do we teach it?
Sure. I'll say the first thing is, if we are being a leader there, we have been serving customers for a lot of time and someone new joins in. Like Keith mentioned, we first tell them the kind of things they never have to say. Kind of like put a post-it or some kind of a paper just on the seat so that they remember this, that don't say those things because these mean this in there. and also tell them that, like I was talking about Indonesia, that if someone would have told me that these people are super, super polite, Tanuj, it would have helped me, right? That how you can have a word with them. You'll always say please, you'll always ask for a moment, like some things like this. So this is what we can teach. The other thing that we can teach is lead the way. Like if there is an angry customer, how to take that call and let them put the phone on speaker and see how tell them, show them how you are handling that stuff. So that will help them. It's kind of like leading the way. The third is a little different, which I read from a book called EQ, Emotional Intelligence. It was completely different, and I got to think here. It's called perspective therapy. So how would we want to do this in a customer agent stuff is, let's suppose every week we have a call, like we record a call and we show it to them. We have 5-6 agents in our team and we're showing it to everyone. And we're asking them, from the tone of the voice, try to understand what kind of emotions the person is throwing. And everyone writes down those emotions that they are feeling, right? And then in the next, after everyone has written down their emotions and told it to the group, then you have a third party call as well recorded. The third party is actually asked the customer how did they feel at that moment, and then the customer is explaining that stuff, and then people are saying how much they were able to understand from that voice, that how they were feeling. And if we make this a regular exercise, this will actually help a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So this
is a very practical addition. Thank you. That's awesome. Aileen, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that suggestion. So in my previous experience with call centers, that was definitely something that we would do. We would, all the calls were recorded, so we got to cherry pick which ones we wanted to show the team, of great examples, and we would do a similar thing. We would say, how's this making you feel? And they would listen to the tone from the customer, and they would also kind of mentally note, well, I feel frustrated for them, or I feel like anxiety because it's taking too long to get what they want, or I can hear that they've had to repeat themselves again, and all this stuff. So you could hear that they had the empathy. But on the flip side, we would also give them calls that were not done very well. And we'd say, talk to me about what's coming up for you in these examples. What could we do better? And one thing that I really love is, so Nadine's just talked about what her team are doing to show empathy at the moment. So Nadine is the owner of a e-commerce office supplies company here in Australia, and they ship globally. And here in the southern part of Australia, or in Melbourne, we're in lockdown again. And her team, who are not in lockdown, they're up in the sunny Gold Coast, they still have got together, and they understand that their customers are in a situation. So it is not one of those times where you'd send off a package and go, hope you have a great day. Well, no, we're not having a great day. We're locked down. Again, we're frustrated, we're upset, we're hurt, we're mad. So they've come together, and the leadership team and the team themselves have said, how can we show those people empathy? So they specifically target those people ordering from Melbourne, and they put a stay safe note, like individually written stay safe note into every package, so that the customers, when they receive it, they go, oh my God, they get it. We feel seen, and we get that they get us. So I love that type of initiative from businesses.
I do too, though the example, they're not communicating across cultures. In that case, they're communicating in dire times to people who could really use a lift, even a small handwritten note. I just to wrap up our discussion here, I think this question probably deserves another panel discussion, because I live here in Washington, D.C., and I work in the U.S. all the time. But I have also worked for an airline in Abu Dhabi, and they're in their call center. They have a room where, at their headquarters building, they have a room where they host. They have a space set aside to meet with upset customers on site. Customers who will come in to meet with them, because culturally, if you are a person of great status, you do not think you're going to lift the phone or write an email. You're going to go in to the office to complain, and you want to be met with someone physically in a nice space. You want to speak with someone who understands your worth in all the ways that your culture recognizes your worth. And I just think, if I were working in that call center, this 100% through and through North American person, how much training I would need my employer to provide for me so that I could carry off that interaction without making a horrible gaffe. Because that is not how customer service is done in the US, and that is not how we express empathy. We don't express empathy based on your birthright. That's just not how we do it. So when we think about cultures and we compare them, cultures that focus where the individual is the focus versus the group, where you are born with status or where you earn status, these are really, really different aspects of culture. And I feel for hourly earners, frontline customer service agents who have to meet production deadlines. And we're also asking them to cross cultures and to succeed. It's a lot to ask. So, yeah. Anybody
it's a lot
else?
to ask, and I think you're right, Leslie. We don't, and we certainly don't here in Australia. And I know from working with other countries, training to that level to not put the team into a position where a gaffe could happen. We don't give them that depth of training that, it doesn't happen. It needs to, but it doesn't.
Right. And we're asking people who are relatively without power in their work to exercise great cultural subtlety. So opening up to anyone who's joined us this evening, Dave, Nadine, Arch, Jamie, Wesley, anyone who's joined us, if you have a question or a comment, we're watching those. We're going to wrap up in just a little bit. While the comments are coming in, panelists, is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
I'll just pile on to the comment you made to recognize anybody working in customer service and in the front line. Thank you for all you do. It is super appreciated. And if you should be proud of how you interact with people and show your empathy. And we're all still learning, but just keep up the good fight as well.
All right, that's a very encouraging thing to leave with. Dave is asking for your study. So Keith, if you share that with me, I will share it out. Would anyone else like to say anything as we're getting ready to wrap up?
I love the note thing which Aileen mentioned, the stay safe part. It's actually what I'm going to tell you. It's absolutely different, not from this, but it helps a lot. So there was a time 1.5 months ago, my sister and her whole family, she's married, and the kids all were suffering from COVID. And we used to deliver packages to them for food, right? They could not make their own food because they were worried about their parents as well, as the parents were also staying at that time and they didn't get COVID. So we used to deliver the food every day. And what my wife did, because my sister was going to hospital, taking her husband, her kid, and she was doing a lot of stuff and she was tired. So when in the food packages, she made some notes. That was kind of like a surprise. That Richa, that's my sister's name, you're doing really good. I'm so proud of you. And these kind of smileys she made in just that small lunch packages that we were going, and that made my sister's day. She actually cried while seeing this. So this is and I feel my wife is more empathetic than me for sure, because I could never even think of doing something like this. So just a different story, but that's what I wanted to add to Aileen's.
Well, anyone who wraps up a panel discussion by praising his wife, I'm here for that. So, well, I would like to say thank you to my panelists from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you. I'm glad that we had our discussion. So we'll say good night for now. And until the next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Philip.
Bye.
Thank you, Leslie,
Bye-bye.
for all this.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.